The lights inside the historic theater dimmed slowly, and a hush rolled over the crowd like a wave pulling back from shore. Thousands of fans filled every seat, their faces glowing faintly beneath the soft gold chandeliers hanging above them. Some had traveled across the country just to be there that night. Others had waited decades for a moment they never thought they would witness. The stage stood empty except for a single microphone placed in the center beneath a pale spotlight. No giant screens flashed, no dramatic opening music thundered through the speakers. Just silence and anticipation. Backstage, Lisa Marie Presley stood completely still, staring at the floor while her hands trembled slightly at her sides. The distant roar of the audience echoed through the walls, but she barely heard it. Her heart pounded hard enough to make her chest ache. She had spent most of her life carrying a name that the world would never stop talking about. Presley. To millions of people, it represented magic, music, rebellion, and history. To her, it was also family, love, pressure, loss. For years, people had compared her to her father. They searched her face for his smile, listened for traces of his voice, and wondered if any piece of Elvis Presley still lived inside her. Lisa had always tried to be herself. But tonight felt different. Tonight wasn't about headlines. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't even about proving anything. It was about memory. A producer gently touched her shoulder. "You ready?" he whispered. Lisa closed her eyes. For one brief moment, she wasn't standing backstage at a sold-out tribute event. She was a little girl again. She remembered sitting on the staircase at Graceland late at night while music drifted through the halls. She remembered hearing her father laugh from another room. She remembered the warmth in his voice when he sang softly during rehearsals, never realizing anyone was listening. Those memories had followed her entire life. Now they felt painfully close. Lisa took a shaky breath. "I'm ready," she said quietly. The stage manager nodded. A moment later, the announcer's voice filled the theater. "Ladies and gentlemen, Lisa Marie Presley." The audience exploded into applause. Lisa stepped into the light. The cheering grew louder instantly. People rose to their feet before she even reached the microphone. Some fans clutched old vinyl records against their chests. Others held photographs of Elvis high in the air. A few older audience members were already wiping away tears. Lisa smiled nervously. She looked around the room, overwhelmed by the emotion surrounding her. Then the applause slowly faded. The silence returned. She leaned closer to the microphone. "Thank you for being here tonight," she began softly. "I know many of you loved my father deeply. So did I." The crowd answered with gentle applause. Lisa swallowed hard. There are moments in life when memories feel so alive, it's almost like time never passed at all. Her voice cracked slightly. "And tonight, I just want to share one of those moments with you." The orchestra behind the curtain began to play. A slow piano melody floated into the air. The audience immediately recognized it. "Can't Help Falling in Love." A wave of emotion swept through the room instantly. Lisa lowered her eyes. Then she sang. The first note froze the entire theater. Gasps spread through the crowd. Several people covered their mouths in shock. Because for a split second, it didn't sound like Lisa Marie Presley. It sounded like Elvis. Not an imitation. Not a performance trying to copy him. Something deeper. The tone, the warmth, the emotional pull hidden inside every word, it carried a haunting resemblance to her father's voice. Fans stared at each other in disbelief. One older man sitting near the front suddenly burst into tears. His wife grabbed his hand tightly as he whispered, "My God, it's him." Lisa continued singing, unaware that half the audience had already started crying. The emotion inside her voice felt raw and unguarded. Every lyric seemed wrapped in memory. "Wise men say, only fools rush in." Her voice trembled ever so slightly on certain notes, but somehow that made the performance even more powerful. It felt human, real, and heartbreakingly familiar. A young woman in the balcony held her phone with shaking hands while tears streamed down her cheeks. "My grandmother loved Elvis," she whispered to her friend. "She passed away last year. She would have loved this." The orchestra swelled behind Lisa, but the room remained almost completely silent except for soft sobbing throughout the audience. People weren't just hearing a song. They were hearing memory come alive. Lisa finally looked up from the microphone. As she scanned the crowd, she noticed tearful faces everywhere. Something shifted inside her. For years, she had tried to escape the endless comparisons to her father. But in that moment, she realized the audience wasn't comparing her to Elvis to judge her. They were grieving him, missing him, and somehow, through her voice, they felt close to him again. Lisa's own eyes filled with tears. Still, she kept singing. Take my hand, take my whole life too. The resemblance became even stronger during the lower notes. People shook their heads in disbelief. Some fans who had seen Elvis perform live decades earlier began openly weeping. An elderly woman clutched a scarf tightly in her lap. I haven't felt this since 1977, she cried softly. The camera operators backstage stopped focusing on technical cues because even they were emotional. One crew member quietly wiped his eyes. Another simply stared at the stage, speechless. Lisa reached the final chorus. By then, her voice carried both strength and pain. The kind of pain that only comes from loving someone who is no longer there. And yet somehow, through music, still feels close. For I can't help falling in love with you. The final note lingered through the theater. Then everything went silent, completely silent. For 2 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And then the crowd erupted. Thunderous applause exploded through the building. People leapt to their feet screaming, crying, cheering. Lisa stepped back from the microphone in shock. The standing ovation only grew louder. Some fans placed their hands over their hearts. Others openly sobbed. A man near the stage shouted, "Thank you for bringing him back to us." Lisa's lips trembled. She looked overwhelmed. She hadn't expected this reaction. The applause continued for nearly 3 minutes. Finally, Lisa raised her hand gently, asking the crowd to settle. When the room quieted again, she smiled through tears. I used to be afraid of singing songs connected to my father, she admitted. The audience listened closely, because nobody could ever be him. Applause rippled softly through the room. Lisa nodded. But over time, I realized something. She paused. When people hear him in my voice, it's not because I'm trying to sound like him. Her eyes glistened beneath the stage lights. It's because he's part of me. The audience broke into emotional applause again. Lisa smiled sadly. And he always will be. The crowd stood once more. Even members of the orchestra were wiping tears from their faces. But the night was far from over. Lisa took another deep breath. I want to tell you all something, she said quietly. The theater instantly became silent. Again. When I was little, I used to sit outside rehearsal rooms at Graceland and listen to my dad sing for hours. Fans leaned forward, completely captivated. He didn't know I was there most of the time. A soft laugh moved through the audience. Lisa smiled faintly. He'd sing gospel songs late into the night. Sometimes he'd stop halfway through and laugh if he forgot the words. She looked toward the ceiling for a moment, lost in memory. And every now and then, he'd look over and catch me listening. Her voice cracked again, and instead of telling me to go to bed, he'd smile and keep singing. The audience melted. Several people began crying all over again. Lisa placed her hand against her chest. I think music was the only place where he truly felt free. The room remained perfectly still. And maybe tonight, she paused, struggling to continue. Maybe tonight, for just a few minutes, we all got to feel close to him again. The applause returned immediately, but this time it felt softer, more emotional, more grateful. Lisa stepped away from the microphone briefly as the orchestra prepared for the next song. Backstage, crew members exchanged stunned looks. Nobody had expected the performance to affect people so deeply. Social media had already exploded. Clips of Lisa singing were spreading online at lightning speed. Comments poured in by the thousands. I closed my eyes and heard Elvis. This gave me chills. I'm crying uncontrollably. She carries his soul in her voice. Fans around the world began sharing memories of Elvis, posting old photographs, stories from concerts, and personal experiences connected to his music. Inside the theater, the emotional atmosphere only intensified. Lisa returned to the microphone once more. This next song, she said softly, was one of his favorites. The crowd erupted before she even announced the title. Then the first guitar chords echoed through the room. Love Me Tender. A collective gasp spread across the audience. People immediately began crying again. Lisa closed her eyes and sang. This time, the resemblance to Elvis felt even more haunting. Not just vocally, emotionally. There was a vulnerability in her delivery that reminded people of the tenderness Elvis carried beneath all the fame and glamour. It felt intimate, almost sacred. Fans held each other tightly throughout the performance. One elderly couple in the front row cried openly while swaying together. The husband whispered, "This was our wedding song." His wife nodded through tears. "We danced to Elvis in 1965. Lisa's voice grew stronger during the second verse. The emotion inside her performance seemed to rise naturally, as though years of buried memories were pouring into every lyric. "Love me tender, love me true, all my dreams fulfilled." The audience sang softly along with her. Thousands of voices blending together beneath the theater lights. For a moment, it no longer felt like a concert. It felt like a family gathered together in shared memory. People from different generations sat side by side. Grandparents, parents, teenagers discovering Elvis through their families. All united by one voice. And by the daughter carrying part of that voice forward. Lisa opened her eyes during the final chorus. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks now. But she didn't wipe them away. Neither did the audience. When the song ended, the applause thundered once again. But this time, the crowd began chanting, "Elvis, Elvis, Elvis." Lisa looked down, overcome with emotion. Then something unexpected happened. She gently shook her head. "No," she whispered into the microphone. The chanting slowly stopped. Lisa smiled softly. "Tonight isn't about trying to replace him." The audience listened carefully. Nobody ever could. She took a breath. "But maybe," her voice trembled, "maybe love doesn't really disappear when someone leaves us." The room became silent again. "Maybe it echoes." Many audience members broke down completely at those words. And maybe music is one of the ways we hear those echoes. The theater erupted into emotional applause louder than ever before. Lisa stepped away from the microphone again, visibly struggling to hold herself together. Backstage, several crew members were crying openly now. One longtime producer shook his head in disbelief. "I've worked concerts for 30 years, he whispered. "I've never seen anything like this." Meanwhile, clips from the performance continued spreading online. News outlets quickly picked up the story. Headlines appeared everywhere. Fans left in tears after Lisa Marie Presley sounds unbelievably like Elvis. The emotional performance nobody expected. Lisa Marie Presley honors her father in heartbreaking tribute. Inside the theater, Lisa prepared for one final song. The orchestra waited quietly. The audience sensed something special was coming. Lisa returned to center stage. She looked exhausted emotionally, but peaceful. "I almost didn't do this tonight," she admitted. The crowd murmured softly. "I was afraid." She smiled sadly. "Afraid people would compare me to him." A voice from the audience shouted, "We love you, Lisa." The crowd applauded. Lisa nodded gratefully. "But tonight reminded me that music isn't about perfection." She looked around the theater. "It's about connection." The audience answered with thunderous applause. Lisa placed her hand over her heart. "And I've never felt more connected to my father than I do right now." Tears rolled down countless faces. The orchestra began playing softly behind her. Then Lisa sang one final song. "If I Can Dream." The emotional impact was immediate. The powerful lyrics filled the theater like a prayer. Lisa poured every ounce of herself into the performance. Pain, love, memory, hope, it all lived inside her voice. And somehow, impossibly, people could hear Elvis there too. Not as a ghost, not as an imitation, but as something carried forward through blood, memory, and love. When Lisa reached the final chorus, the audience rose to their feet once again. Many were openly sobbing now. Even security guards near the exits were wiping tears from their eyes. There must be lights burning brighter somewhere. Got to be birds flying higher in a sky more blue. If I can dream of a better land,